Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Pranav Bhimsetti, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the LSESU India Forum 2022 Entertainment Panel. I'm delighted to announce we have an esteemed panel joining us today and helping us carry forward the legacy of LIF as United Kingdom's largest India-centric conference. Today, we'll be broadly discussing the topic of the new changing habits of content consumption in India. Joining us today, we have an incredibly and well-accomplished panel from different avenues, and I'm going to introduce you to all of them. For the first one, we have Monika Shergill, who's the Vice President of Content in Netflix India. Monika oversees the development, creation, licensing, and acquisition of all Indian language content in Netflix, including films, TVs, reality shows, comedy specials, and docuseries. Monika and our team have built strong partnerships with leading Indian creators and production houses, including Excel Entertainment, and have entertained audiences in India and across the world with diverse stories in several Indian languages, including Minnal Murali, The Fame Game, Ye Kali Kali Aankhe, Kapil Sharma, I'm Not Done Yet, The Maka Are Young, The Disciple, and many more. In 2022, Netflix announced its largest slate in India, yet as well as several upcoming titles, including Rajkumar Rao's and Radhika Apte starrer Monika, Oh My Darling, The Archies, which will be directed by Zoya Akhtar, and Sanjay Leela Bansali's Hira Mandi. Shergill brings 2.5 decades of entertainment experience and has previously held several executive positions across global broadcast networks in India, including Viacom 18, where she helmed the content launch of a streaming service, and at Star India, which currently is Disney Star India, where she led the programming, strategy, and content teams across several linear channels. Also, the groundbreaking series, The Satyameva Jayate. She's also a former journalist and a documentary filmmaker. She started her career reporting for the Green Oscar-winning environment series, Living on the Edge. She's also on the jury of BAFTA's Breaking India initiative to identify new creative voices. Moving on to Megha Tata. Megha Tata is the Managing Director of Discovery Communications India, a media and an entertainment industry veteran. Megha has held leadership roles at organizations such as BTVI, HBO, Turner International, Star TV, in an illustrious career spanning over 3 decades. Megha currently leads multiple national and international industry forums. She's an esteemed member of board of the Indian Broadcasting Foundation. She's on the board of National Media and Entertainment Committee of FICCI. She's amongst the 2020 Impact Top 50 Influential Women of the Year. She has been bestowed with multiple industry accolades in her career, recognized as Top 50 Influential Women in Media, Marketing, and Advertising. Megha was conferred with the Women of the Decade in Media by the Women Economic Forum in 2018. Moving on to Sameer. Sameer is a media and entertainment industry pioneer, credited with leading the content team that built Star TV in the early days, including greenlighting the Kaun Banega Crorepati, the Indian show of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, now credited as the turning point in Indian television history. For the past 4 years, he has been part of a movement redefining storytelling in India. As the chief executive of the Aditya Birla Group's Applause Entertainment, Nair is the next phase of Indian content boom, with shows such as The Office, Hostages, Criminal Justice, and Mayangari, The City of Dreams, for Disney India's streaming platform Hotstar. For over his career at Star, he's handled a variety of portfolios and became the chief executive officer in 2006. He was responsible for bringing some of the most loved shows on TV, including Kyunki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, Kahani Gar Gar Ki, and of course, The Coffee with Karan, and the Great Indian Comedy Show. Moving on to Ashok Namboodiri. Ashok Namboodiri is the Chief Business Officer of Z Entertainment Enterprises. He's a business leader with an in-depth understanding of leading and managing businesses in the Indian environment and a proven track record of consistent results across sectors. With almost 3 decades of experience in companies such as Hindustan Unilever, Coca-Cola, Tata Beverages, he's a professional with demonstrated ability to manage both large, complex businesses as well as scale up small businesses. He's also a certified filmmaker, a prolific writer, and an occasional painter, and is passionate about training and mentoring young people. Finally, last but not the least, Suchitra Pillai is an actress, model, anchor, and a VJ. Apart from roles in movies such as Dil Chahta Hai, Page 3, Laga Chunari Mein Dang, and Fashion, Suchitra is also a singer in the indie pop and the rock genre, and with an album such as Life released in 2011. She's also an accomplished theater artist. She first appeared in a music video by Apache Indian and then in Bali Sago's Dil Cheez Hai Kya video. She also appears in the 2016 Hollywood film The Other Side of the Door and in the 2017 indie film The Valley, for which she won the Best Actress award at both the Long Island International Film Festival and the Milan International Filmmakers Festival in 2019. And finally, our moderator, Gaurav Baharwani. Today's event will be moderated by him, and he's been very closely associated with LIF for many years now. Recipient of many awards, Mr. Baharwani is a leading brand valuation and human brands expert. He's the founder and CEO of 116 Network Limited, an investor-backed sports and entertainment company headquartered in London with offices in India and UAE. He completed his postgraduate studies in the UK with 2 master's degrees. He's widely acknowledged for his role as the former brand chief of India's most iconic sportsman, MS Dhoni. And he recently produced a film based on Team India's historic win at the inaugural ICC 20 World Cup. Thank you for joining us, the moderator. So before opening the floor to discussion, I would like to make a few housekeeping notes. First of all, this is an online event. We would like to request the audience to bear with us if we have any sort of technical difficulties. The session will be run in a fluid manner and will be open discussion. If any of our audience members would like to ask any questions, please feel free to ask us in the Q&A section below on the Zoom link, and we will make sure to pick out and pass the most relevant questions to the panelists. If you would like a direct question at a particular panelist, you can specify the name. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our moderator, Ms. Baharwani. Thank you. You're on mute.
Thank you, Pranav, for the kind introduction. We've had a wonderful week of discussions across various panels at the LSE India Forum this year. And today it's the final day of the forum. I like to call it the showstopper panel. And I have this bunch of India's smartest content creators, curators, distributors, deliverers. See, whatever you call them, if there was one thing that kept us going during the pandemic, it was the continuous availability of entertainment content, be it on a streaming platform, a digital platform, or television. And we were being continuously fed with these stories that made us laugh, cry, angry, optimistic, inspired. And I think it's always very important to thank those hands who worked in the background to keep us hopeful that the world was not going to come to an end. We are very fortunate to have some of those valuable hands today in this room. And I'd like to thank all of you for your contributions. Your content brought families together in, I think, the most trying times. And subconsciously, it became a positive whisper in our ears which said, all is well, of course, in Amir Khan's voice. All right, so before we all start getting a little more emotional, let's jump into the session. Firstly, thank you all for being here on a Sunday. As a moderator, I'm going to do my best to keep the conversation entertaining so that it's worth your time. In the next maybe 80 minutes or so, I will pick the brains of these very fabulous personalities in the room who have actually redefined that content isn't the king, it's the kingdom. I'm hopeful that by the end of this session, there will be some meaningful takeaways for the students and others from around the world who are listening in. So here's how we'll run it. I'll kick off the conversation, giving each panelist, say, about 3 or 4 minutes to share their views on the theme of the conference. Next, I'll follow up with maybe 1 or 2 questions posed to the panelists, and they can each react. Like I said, if you have a point of view that you'd like to sort of counter the other panelists, then you can do that. And in the last 15 minutes or so, we'll open it up to the floor and take some questions. So without further ado, let me get started. I'll just sort of set the context here that entertainment is ultimately an attention business. And competition for attention has never been fiercer, and I'm sure all the panelists here will agree. Besides the traditional media businesses, we now see a lot of tech firms, non-media brands jumping into content production and distribution. So it's very clear that the industry is growing through a seismic change, and with change obviously comes a lot of opportunities. Which brings to my first question. Now, talking in reference to your own personal experience within your organizations, or perhaps your area of expertise, how are the pandemic shaped customers in India consuming content today? What has changed? What has remained the way it was? And what more changes can we expect? So that's my broad question now. Clearly, the women have outnumbered the men in the room. So I'm going to start with the women first. Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, sorry. So Megha, I'm going to start with you. If you can start talking about, your experiences at Discovery since you took charge in 2019. How is the company tackling this changing content consumption behavior?
Thanks, Gaurav, and thank you for inviting me on this wonderful panel. Hello, everyone. Wonderful friends to meet again in this Zoom setup. So first of all, I think, it's a great topic to get the conversation started. And I think I probably speak on behalf of everyone. When we were in this industry, when we got in and we've come in with, at least I've been around for 30 years in this industry. We've seen a huge change since when television began in the country and how it's got evolved from a content consumption point of view. I think we all were smelling the coffee that there was change coming around the corner. Even about say 5 years ago, we knew that there is a shift taking in the way the content is getting consumed. We knew the digital was showing up its face out there, and there is more and more of digital content consumption which was taking place. But what happened in the last 2 years was it basically accelerated the growth of digital than what was probably envisaged a few years ago. So what was possibly going to happen in 5 to 7 years happened in 2, and that sort of created a sort of a disruption in the way the content is getting produced, actually consumed, and hence the content production had to also change because that's what the audiences wanted. And I think that was, in my view, a fantastic thing which came out of these 2 unfortunate years. And the reason is that when you change things, it obviously sort of perturbs you a bit. It's difficult to sort of move your way around it with the change which is taking place, and you need to move with the change, but it's easier said than done. But I think all of us, and I salute everybody in the industry who really took on this challenge right up front, and not only overcame it, but excelled in it. So not only survived, but actually thrived in these 2 years in terms of creating content where the consumers wanted to consume. For Discovery also, for example, like we've been a traditional television business, globally for that matter. And it was right at I think it was almost on the day of the lockdown in India when we launched Discovery Plus, which was a decision we did contemplate. Is this a good time, bad time? There was a lot of work which had gone in, bringing this product into the market. In fact, India was the first country in the global ecosystem of Discovery to launch a OTT service. Discovery did not have an OTT service anywhere in the world, and India became the first country to launch. And so it was a big commitment we were giving to the organization that we can do this and we had to do it in this sudden thing which hit us, right? So it wasn't an easy decision, but we took on face value, and we said, okay, we got to go and try this out, and I'm so glad we did, because clearly there was an opportunity for people to consume. As you rightly said, people were at home. There was more time for them to consume content, and so not only did digital grow, even television grew. And that is the beauty of India, that it's one of the few countries in the world, I would say, where not only is the digital consumption growing, even the television consumption is growing. And like I always say, it doesn't have to be an either or world. It is an and world, wherein both the medium, so to speak, which is providing you the content, can survive and thrive, and that's what happened. So I think what really came out of the positive thing, I guess, came out of this was not only did the organization stepped up to the challenge, but were able to produce content which hadn't been tried before. And that experimentation, which happened in the digital world, especially in the OTT world, and we have all the experts in this panel who will probably speak more on this, actually made all of us realize that there was always an audience to watch it. It's just that they weren't people providing that content. So there was always it's a chicken and egg, what comes first? So there was always an argument, would you make content like this, will people consume? Because we were left with no choice, I think, necessity became the mother of invention, and that's what happened. And then this amazing content came not only in the fiction world, even in the non-fiction world, which I represent, was beautifully explored and appreciated by our audiences, and even continue to do so now. So I think, in a nutshell, I would say that even though this was the toughest times for all of us as individuals, as professionals, the positive thing which came out of this was that it created an opportunity of new way of bringing content to our consumers around the country.
Thank you, Megha. That is wonderful. It's good to get a viewpoint from you, from the Discovery's side. Let me come to you, Monika. When it comes to changing content consumption behavior, I think Netflix played a major role in that transformation. You not only offered us good content, but you enabled us to experience content that we perhaps would have never otherwise. I don't know how many of us in India ever thought we would be binging on Spanish and Korean dramas. You offered us, it was almost like a new cuisine to taste, and most of us loved it. Perhaps some didn't. But what it did was it opened up our minds to the world of non-traditional content. Talk to us more about it, please.
Thanks, Gaurav. The last 2 years actually have been very exceptionally difficult for the world. And keeping the business part of it aside, I also feel that all of us here on the panel who are in the business of storytelling have realized one thing, that stories are a way to connect and to have shared experiences, which can really give you whatever I would say, some sort of solace. It gives a sort of escape to people. It helped us learn something new at a difficult time. So it really became a sort of a connective tissue. So I feel happy that as the entertainment industry and the streaming industry in particular at Netflix, we could offer people a lot of stories that could really help them ride out a difficult time. And where experimentation is concerned, it's a very interesting thing that has happened over the last 2 years. I mean, and these kind of waves actually happen at certain points in time. So I think last 2 years have been a sort of a very sort of watershed sort of moment in the way we consume entertainment, what kind of entertainment we consume, and what shape it will take in the years to come. So suddenly, I would say, people who were not experimenting earlier, who had this barrier to watching language content, had time on their hands, were looking for something, and discovery became a very important thing. I mean, Megha, Discovery Channel and discovery as a word. So became a very, very important thing. People were discovering a lot of new stories. And whether it's Turkish content, Korean, Spanish, and really from across the world. And I would actually also tell you something which we don't pay that much attention to. Probably Indian content also did well in Spanish and Portuguese. It would travel in English, but actually Indian content really started doing better in dubs across the world. So, it was a very interesting time where high experimentation happened, which has led to the tastes of people becoming elevated. The more you expose yourself to international content, different kinds of stories, cultures, it suddenly starts very quietly changing your taste and what your expectation from creators is, from stories is. And you start looking for that in your content, stories coming out of your own culture also. So I think that is a shift which is already underway, and there is no rolling back on that. People want very disruptive stories. They want new things coming at them. They really want new formats, and language has stopped becoming a barrier. I would also say that 2 waves that happened are very defining waves in content. If you see what happened with Korean content, is something totally dramatic, not seen before. It suddenly took the world by storm. And not just one. Of course, Squid Game, it peaked with Squid Game, but even before Squid Game, it had started happening through dramas. And then it peaked with that, and everything that has been coming after that has actually, the spotlight is on that region for the kind of stories they're telling. And if I were to say, the same thing happened in India with South content. So when you look at the reach of cinemas, we have about 9,000 odd cinemas, give or take. And during the pandemic, that number reduced. And earlier when South movies would come out, you would not be able to get your prints in the north, in the HSM market. So the access was less to South stories. And suddenly when all of that, when theaters shut down, and the stories started coming on streaming, a lot more people had access to them. So just like there was a Korean wave happening on the global scene, there was a South content wave, which really happened through streaming. So I think that's a very, very powerful thing that has happened, where people have actually started moving beyond their own language that they know, and started looking at stories across languages. So I think experimentation, going across languages, and really looking at new formats and being open. I think the way it has increased openness to all kinds of stories, a very heavy desire to go into the unknown, whether formats, and like Megha was also saying, reality. We saw so many documentaries. Last 2 years have had a very significant increase in documentary viewing also, aside of films and reality shows, and of course, scripted series from India and across the world.
Thank you, Monika. I think, two very interesting points that you've made is, consumption of Indian content outside India, which is something that we weren't aware of. And of course, the consumption of, South content by the other parts of India. And I've watched a few of them, and I was so happy to see the kind of creative skill set that we have in South and the kind of stories that they create, which we were not consuming before, staying in Bombay or Delhi. But we have access to that through platforms like yours. So thank you for that. So Chitra, I'm going to come to you now and turn the spotlight on you. With your width of expertise and experiences, makes me wonder that, for somebody so talented, the opportunity presented by the pandemic for you to craft your delivery would have perhaps been, I assume, would have been the most enduring experience of your life.
And it was absolute. Yeah, sure. As an actor, it was absolutely fantastic. I have to say, when restrictions were lifted and when we could start shooting, there was stuff that we had already started shooting before, the pandemic started and before lockdown, etc., which was already ready for, like my Netflix show, Betal and Masaba and all of this. We had already shot all of that. So it was great to have those releases on Alt Balaji, Kehne Ko Hum Safar Hai. I had many releases as soon as lockdown started. So I was one of the lucky ones, frankly speaking. And that kind of catapulted, for me. So when restrictions got lifted, I have to say I did about 8 projects within that time from September till January, So for an actor, I think OTT and everything that is brought with it has just been absolutely incredible. One has not, has never been, in my 27 years in the industry, I was never offered the kind of roles that I'm being offered, by OTT platforms, and each and every one is different. I've never played a commandant of a task force like I did in Betal, or a scary person, for that matter. So many different roles. And as far as watching the shows were concerned, as somebody who was stuck in the lockdown as well with my family at home, and as they were discussing, we were watching everything. My husband was watching everything, whatever language, and as Megha also suggested, any language, was coming up, and you would watch the translated version of it, saying which I also dubbed, all of this content in other languages. I'm a dubbing artist as well. So I got to see a lot of that, not only in a dubbing studio, but also on screen, which makes it very interesting. Series like What If, etc. I was Renee Zellweger's voice. So for all of us, I think it was an awakening. What we used to just watch, maybe this show, that show, or the other, we had enough time on our hands to sit and start experimenting as to what else do we want to watch, whether it's fictional, whether it's non-fictional. It kind of opened up everybody's eyes to the fact that there is so much else to see. As far as storyline is concerned, as far as cinema is concerned, that too, I mean, one of my second Malayalam movie, we made it, and we knew that it was going to release on Amazon, Cold Case, the one with Prithviraj. But, the enthusiasm and everything was just as much. Nobody cared that the cinemas weren't open. Everyone was just as excited about it being online, because the reach is crazy. It's really incredible, to have somebody from London calling me up and saying, I saw your movie, somebody else from South Africa calling up and saying, I saw this. It was absolutely amazing. So for an actor, I think OTT has been the best thing to have happened even before the pandemic and during the pandemic. I have no complaints whatsoever. I've just, had a blast and I continue to do so.
Thank you, Suchitra. It's lovely to hear that perspective as well. I'm going to move to the men now. Ashok, I'll bring you in first. I remember reading Mr. Goenka's vision called Z 4.0. And one of the key focus areas that I read was, you're going to focus on building your international markets. Interestingly, when we talk about content consumption, in my view, I think there are two kinds of Indian customers that we should be talking about. There's a customer who's in India and he's exposed to the kind of content we get here, but there's also an Indian customer who lives outside India, and their exposure to content would be obviously very varied depending on where and which part of the world they are in. So, I just want to understand from your perspective, from Z's perspective, how are you tackling these changing behaviors now that you are obviously overseeing the international markets as well? I'm sure you are sort of finding very different expectations from customers in various markets where Z is currently available.
Absolutely, Gaurav. Thank you for having me over, and I'm delighted to share the stage with this list of panelists. You're right. I mean, at Z, we've been one of the pioneers with regard to the international markets. We are present in all the 5 continents. We are present in 170 countries. And over the last 3 years, the pandemic has basically stirred certain macro trends into a fast forward mode in terms of content consumption. That's the headline. Building on what Megha and Monika said, it's an and world. Consumption has basically been on linear television as well as digital. The industry has stepped up to the challenge and the demand supply gap is getting bridged faster. Monika mentioned how content is beginning to travel, Indian content traveling across the globe. I'd like to, before I jump into the question that you asked, I'd like to kind of maybe deep dive a little bit into the 3 years of the pandemic. If you were to just look at it as 2 or 3 phases, I think the first phase was really about our screens becoming a window to the world. Content in news jumped up, trebled up several times. People wanted to know what was happening. People wanted to stay in touch with news that was happening outside. And then over a period of time in phase 2, the screens became a window into your own lives. And people started wanting to basically, since a lot of things were denied in terms of basically sources of entertainment, education became online, children had to study at home, no social interaction. And that's what led to screens becoming a window into your lives. And people basically said that, invested into short form videos, your 15 minutes of prominence really became big. Personalization crept in and a lot of localization crept in. In the international markets, we have seen more or less some of these trends play out. We've seen in the first phase a lot of connecting back to your home country, whether it's Indians or whether it is South Asians. Connecting back has been a very dominant theme. And which has always been the case, but we've seen a step up in terms of content preferences, content choices that came through. Content has begun traveling. I'd like to pick up where Monika left off. Basically, Bong Joon-ho, the director of Parasite, actually talked about the 3-centimeter barrier to content consumption. He meant the subtitles. We've seen that explode across international markets, whether it's Latin America, whether it is Europe, whether it is Africa. Indian content is being picked up. There's a lot of interest. I travel to a lot of content exhibitions, and we see a lot of people coming forward and asking for Indian content. Previously, it was about how well they did in India. Now the paradigm has shifted to what is possibly the resonance given the socio-cultural parameters of those markets. And therefore, there is far more literacy with regard to content is really the headline that I'd like to call out. I think going forward, we are going to see a lot more interest in Indian content, which I think is going to augur well, both for the industry as well as for the entire ecosystem.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you for your insights. And finally, Samir, I'm going to come to you now. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but they're calling you the king of content making, and I totally agree. And if Karan is watching this, he may not like it, but I'm sure he knows that you are one of the best. But given your vital role, obviously in revamping Star, giving us obviously the K-bug, as they say, KBC is still running so successfully, and all thanks to you. And now, as applause, you're spoiling us with obviously remarkable content. Scam 92 is perhaps for me, I think it's one of the best that I've seen. I'm waiting for the next in the series. I think 2003, if I'm not mistaken, is the Telgi scam is what you guys are doing. it's a good indication of what we can expect from Applause. Now, talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on this, whole changing landscape of content consumption in India, and how is Applause going to expand its own kingdom in this space?
Well, actually, hello everyone, and happy to be here. I can't really add, what everyone has spoken, what Megha said, what Monika said, what Suchitra said, what Ashok said. I mean, it's true. All of these things happened. There was a pandemic. 1 billion people got locked up. Actually, 6 billion people got locked up. But let's talk about India. And, and then when you force people into house arrest, then it's needless to say that they have to do something. Your screen is your only window to the world. Consumption went up. Grandparents were hanging out with grandchildren. That helped grandparents get acclimatized to streaming services itself, which wasn't there before. So, of course, all of those things happened. 2-3 things that really stood out for us at Applause in this period. One was, of course, we are a studio. So we are in the business of creating content. And then we, of course, work with all the leading platforms to distribute that. So as creators, it was quite a big shock to start with. Because, the pandemic, when you talk about a lockdown and people in the house and therefore consuming more content, the fact is this content has still got to be made. So like we finished shooting Scam in March, towards the end of March, and then the lockdown happened. And so we did the post-production of Scam remotely. So it was the first show that we were doing complete post-production, completely remote. So none of us met each other. And in fact, the next time I met the team of Scam was on the night the show went dropped on Sony LIV. So those 4, 5, 6 months almost was spent, just talking. And it was the first lockdown, right? It was not the second one. So we learned a lot of things. We learned to, one, cope with this new virus and, how do you deal with it, and the illness and the people and work from home, and all of those things got invented at that time. And we did it across many shows, of course. So, there was a whole bunch of shows that got produced and released at that time, but that was a big learning. When we came out of the first wave, so to say, there was much excitement, everyone rushing back to work. And then we, of course, promptly hit the second one, right? So the next big learning in that second year was that, well, this thing is obviously not going away in a hurry. And, and there are more complications. And all of these things lead to small things, like there are delays, there are date problems, people fall sick, shootings get canceled, things go over budget. And all of these things add up. And they add up in different ways. And, lots of things happen. And the third, I guess, in this, after the second wave and now into the third wave, and still 2 years on, and we now seem to think that, okay, maybe this is in the rearview mirror. So what we've learned out of this is that, okay, there's a huge appetite for content consumption. A lot more people have come into this, into this streaming world. They all want to see content from across, exactly as they say. There's no language border. There is no country border. You're happy to watch anything from anywhere. And anyone from anywhere is happy to watch anything. So all of these things are good. I guess what it does for us as a content company is that the very fact that now all content is equally available on a streaming platform. And I think that's the most revolutionary thing that has happened in the last 4 or 5 years for the content business, that the global streamer has come and revolutionized content distribution. See, before this, what we did is we lived in those little bubbles of our own. You were Hindi entertainment, or you were Malayalam entertainment, or you were news category. Everything required linear TV. If we wanted to watch, somebody comes and says, oh, have you ever seen Fox TV? Well, we haven't. We don't get it here. Those kind of things. I think what the streamer did is essentially flatten the world completely. And it got accelerated in the pandemic. And what it does for content creators like us now is that at the end of the day, our content is now being placed next to the best international content, or the best content from South India, or the best content from anywhere for that matter. So I think that's going to, increasingly as time goes by, it is going to put a lot more pressure on content creators to, improve the quality of content that is being created. Sometimes when I look back to my own days, I've been in the business for some time, I am, quite relieved at the things we got away with. But I don't think we'll be able to do that again. We got away with a lot of things, like how Hindi cinema got away with the 80s. Right. Mm-hmm. So nobody talks about it, and then it sort of happened, and we are all happy and moving on. And then Shah Rukh Khan came, and the world order was restored. But the 80s did happen. So in many ways, the 20s, the 2000s, and the 2010s also did happen. But now I think going forward, you're talking about a more evolved audience. They've seen a lot more. It's a whole new generation, right? It's been now almost 20 years since Kyun Ki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi. So, you're talking about a new breed of people. And they want to see different stuff. They are We've never had this HBO moment in our life, so it's happening now, where we are making what we call cinematic television and all of that. So I think it's a good time. It's been a tricky period. If nothing else, it's made people like us who work with other people, it's made us more empathetic. It's made us more sympathetic. Both coming out of this, it's made us a little more cautious in some way. But on the other hand, you realize that that while there is a degree of caution because of the shocks that you may have felt, the opportunity is too big. It's a huge opportunity that sort of beckons us. So it is a time for risk and challenge and being probably more daring and more courageous. But it's good. It's all good. I think it's all good.
Thank you. No, it is definitely all good. In fact, I want to ask you a question that when you decide to create some content, is there a very thorough research which is done to understand what the consumer is asking for, or is it more instinct that given the scenario that we are seeing in the market, let us make something like scam? I mean, how did you actually think of picking up a scam and deciding to make a trilogy, 3 or 4 parts of of the different scams that we had?
Well, I think, Steve Jobs said it most famously. He said that if you do a focus group and go and ask a bunch of people as to what they want, you're probably not going to get a clear enough answer, right? Because most consumers don't know what they want. It's only after they've got it that they think whether they decide whether they like it or not, right? But that being said, I mean, because that is sounds too risky and terrible on a panel of this kind, and that to the LSE. What happens is that there are, in general, I know human beings like to believe that they are really individual and, I'm special and I'm different, but actually that's not true. That's why you have 12 zodiac signs and 6 billion people approximately divide up into 500 billion apiece, all who feel the exact same way when they read their little horoscope. So what happens is that in general, there are broad genres of content that people like. And that's been proven over time. So people like romance, people like comedy, people like crime in different levels. So we are now no longer a mass audience. We're an audience. We are a mass of niches. And some of these niches are pretty big. Like the number of people who like crime, the number of people who like thrillers, who like action. They're pretty large, young adults. They're large cohorts of audiences. So when we decide to do something, we sort of pick up on that. On scam, it was really the idea that one, Harshad Mehta is a very colorful character. India has not done too many biopics, so we probably should do that. And the way we were telling the story is that while it's a story coming from 30 years ago, we are still telling a young man's story. And we are still telling about a story of a young man who is rising up, right? So it's very aspirational in that sense. It's aspirational, inspirational. He's of course on the wrong side of the law, but I mean, if you've seen the show, we played him completely like the anti-hero of the 70s. So we played him like Amitabh Bachchan, basically. So he was essentially AB from Diwar, doesn't believe in God, filled with daring, and goes and, seriously bends the law, of course, crosses the line, breaks it, and then now must pay for it with his life. So yeah, I mean, I think when we set out to make it, we thought it was a good story. It was a story to be told. And we got great people to work on it. So there was Hansal. There was, we moved to 2-3 producers, but then, we put together a great writing team. Prateek turned out to be a real find, everyone actually. And I think it all came together really well. So that's the one thing scary about that is when I meet people who tell me that thanks to your show, I now understand high finance. That worries me because, that's like watching Grey's Anatomy and wanting to do surgery. But yeah, it was good.
I must tell you, I mean, after we all watched it, I think what's happened in India, and these are conversations I have with obviously friends. They said, the word scam is suddenly starting to sound more positive because we are actually a very different way in which a scam is presented. I think the presentation itself is so important. And I'm going to ask Monika and Megha, when you choose content for and specifically Megha for Discovery Plus as well, when you choose content, what is it that makes you take that decision? Okay, this is a good content and this is something which my audience is not going to like it. Have you gone wrong in some decisions that you've taken and perhaps, you should have actually had that content on your platform and you let it go? Is that something that you guys have experienced? Megha, you want to go first?
Yes, all the time. Yeah. Yeah. And that is how life is. You cannot always have the perfect, in hindsight, everybody is a genius, but when you're taking those decisions, you take some right and some wrong decisions. That's how it is. But I think, so one of the things which we felt in Discovery Plus was that the Plus actually brought in an opportunity to expand our horizons. So Discovery has been seen in a particular avatar in this part of the world, and there's an expectation of discovery being a certain kind of a genre. So there is adventure and there is wildlife, and there is that's the space. It's more in the docu space. But we wanted to experiment with the plus, and that's where we attempted going into genres which were not the core, I wouldn't say the core competence, but the core expectation out of a house of discovery by the audiences. And I think that's really what we played our cards on, and most of, I would say 9 out of 10 shows have done extremely well for us. But genres which were a surprise packet for us, which we didn't really think would really connect, was paranormal and crime. And to Sameer's point, that crime, in fact, because of his scam, we created a scam series as well. And that turned out to be one of our top successes as well. We covered some of, it's called Money Mafia. And it's one of our successful shows on our platform, covering, but it's done in a docudrama style. Because we are a reality platform and non-fiction content, not the fiction kind as of now. So I think that was an experiment we played out and did really well. Adventure is something which continues. What really became one of our top hits was a show called, it was in the history and history genre, which is called Secret of Sonali, which turned out to be a sleeping hit for us, which was hosted by, was produced and it was directed by Neeraj Pandey, and, with Manoj Bajpayee as the face of the show. That really upped the game for us. Now, these were the genres we would have liked to play out in the world of television, but did not have a platform, because Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, TLC, these are, we were bucketed in the content we had to provide. TLC is in the lifestyle space, food space, Animal is all about wildlife, and Discovery about adventure. So if I had to ever put a show like Secret of Sonali, I didn't have a platform to put it on. But with Discovery Plus, I did. And that's what happened. So where the show in the history genre, in the paranormal, in the crime, there's some great paranormal stuff and crime and investigative journalism space. There's some great content lined up, which is coming up in the next month or so. So that's the space we went in. And I think, to Sam's point, a lot of analysis does lead to paralysis. So you do take certain bit of data point, but a lot goes in the gut as well. So you need to know your consumer, what he or she is looking for, and then sort of provide to that space. But yeah, it's not that you'd always get 100% hit rate, but you've got to try it to know whether this something will work or not. So in that sense, I think the genres we explored were probably would have never been able to do if we had not moved into the OTT world as well.
Thank you, Megha. Monika, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, of course. And I completely agree with Megha. Hindsight is 2020. And really, when you're taking content decision, content is a very emotional product. I mean, you can't. It's not like you are in a lab doing R&D and you perfect the product, and then once you've tested it on everyone, that's when you launch it in the market. It's the absolute reverse of that. You really start from a point of gut and vision, passion about a story. And I think that is what really matters. What data can actually help you do is to really, help you decide what is the size of the audience, right? And should you scale it up because you have a large cohort of audience, or should you keep it smaller because you would have a very focused but loyal audience for that? So that's what data can help inform. But otherwise, it's really passion and vision and gut that should define all decisions. And like I would say last year on Netflix, if I were to just look across the number of formats, genres, languages that we programmed in. And Netflix is a slightly different service if I were to just explain. We are a pure play entertainment service. We are not really about bringing out that one story and then waiting for everybody to just gravitate to that one story every single day. And I'm sure everybody on this panel, I can say in a very confirmed way, would be watching something different on Netflix every evening, right? So some people gravitate to a docu like House of Secrets, Burari, which did tremendously well for us. Others would go to a very saucy crime thriller like Haseen Dilruba, which actually was, on top 10 across 22 countries, and people from across different countries actually, really consumed that story. And Taapsee got a lot of outreach, on a story like that. Or, when we talk about a series like Decoupled, which was an English language comedy series, which did brilliantly, or a crime noir like Aranyak, or a film like Dhamaka. And at the same time, you would have something like a Red Notice, rubbing shoulders with a Suryavanshi, which you wouldn't in a normal world think would be possible. So, across the slate, you take decisions, basis, like Sameer rightly said, audience will not know till you program, till you as executives experiment with stories, you support a creator's vision, which is very important to really support the artistic vision of creators. And when you do that, that's when you really actually even cultivate tastes. I mean, whoever thought that documentaries would have a second life? Right? Everyone thought documentaries are these boring, very informative and fuddy-duddy genre, which nobody wants to watch. But actually in the last few years at Netflix, the team has totally revolutionized the way the world consumes documentaries. Even reality shows, if I were to say, shows like Love is Blind, Too Hot to Handle, our own show like Fabulous Lives of Bollywood Wives, narrative reality, or Indian matchmaking. So in a given year, when you move across the slate with so much of diverse content, you will get some ideas. When you're looking at innovation, you will punt and you will program, to several different tastes, and some things will do very, very well. Some things will do moderately well, and some things perhaps are a learning experience. But that's the fun of making content. If you really start programming to just the way a data set tells you, you will never be able to break new ground. And I think that's the thing that we actually look at as, it's anathema in the Netflix world, to not just look at data, to really keep going, keep moving along and looking for that newer and newer spaces and ideas so that you can deliver those breakout hits.
Thank you, Monika. Ashok, I wanted to ask you more from a television perspective, television programming, because of course you have Z5, which is obviously known for its local content a lot. I've watched quite a few of the programs that come on it, but from a television programming point of view and international markets, how are you taking decisions on what kind of shows, TV shows that you're going to actually now run, based on how the behavior has changed worldwide?
Yeah. So, I think I was reading somewhere that in India during the pandemic, television consumption grew by some 38%. In international markets, however, it's a portfolio of markets, and that it doesn't follow a common thread. We all know that the Western markets are witnessing cord cutting, audiences are basically looking at prioritizing digital content, OTT forms of consumption. While if you take markets like the emerging markets, which is the Middle East, or if you take Africa or parts of South Asia, these continue to see distinct growths in linear television, and I believe that this is going to continue to see that trend going forward. So it's a bit of a portfolio game, because you are going to see some markets decline on linear television and grow on digital. Some markets continue to grow on television. I think, to use a model which I used in the consumer goods industry, which is basically to look at size of price and right to win. I think in terms of, data sets, the size of price comes from, the size of demographic cohorts, which basically you use to decide which genre you want to get into. The right to win is basically a function of the positioning of your platform, what are your strengths, and your ability to execute differently, take punts, take risks, etc. What we have seen over a period of time, especially in the last 3 years post-pandemic or during the pandemic, is that, like I said earlier, basically content has begun to travel. We are beginning to see a lot of interest in formats. Formats that have traditionally worked well in India, whether it is singing, dancing, is beginning to travel. We have just finished a few local co-productions in Africa, and we are seeing tremendous response to those as we go forward. We're very bullish on that. Comedy has its limitations because it tends to be subject specific, language specific. The nuances of the language get missed out when content begins to travel, and therefore that might be an issue. But with regard to slice of life programming, I think there's going to be a huge runway as we look forward. Similarly, just to give you another example, Africa over the last few years has seen a lot of increase in shows to do with online dating, marriage planning, wedding planning, things like that from India. And that's again going back to what I said earlier, which is basically the same kind of drivers of socio cultural change basically apply into those markets as well. With regard to South Asian diaspora international markets, essentially people from the first generation, people who've been used to content from India, there continues to be an interest when it comes to linear television. The next generation, we are beginning to see the next generation of Gen X or Gen Y beginning to look at content choices. They are more universal in terms of their content preferences, content choices, and that becomes a little bit more difficult to really cater to. So, what we're really working on and what we believe we should prioritize is how quickly we are able to localize some of these. And localization could be partial, could be full, but there's an opportunity there.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you. Suchitra, I'm going to ask you from an actor's perspective. So, you earlier mentioned that the kind of roles that you are now doing based on, what's changed in the last couple of years, you're doing different kinds of roles. I read somewhere that, you are very interested in doing something around comedy. And we're going to make a joint appeal to Monika to do a special
Yes,
with you.
Yes, most definitely.
All of us here are going to put the pressure on her to make a...
Gaurav, can I just stop you there? Suchitra is coming in a lovely show next month. Yes, she's already there. Yes.
Many congratulations, Suchitra, on that. But, just to come back to my question, are you now choosing the kind of roles you want to do, given that there is experimentation happening across the content platform, or the traditional way was, okay, something good comes, let's do it. But, are you now choosing between, what you would like to be?
Because Gaurav, there is so much more to choose from. The fact that you have all of these OTT platforms, there is so much content being created, and all the new talent is being given an opportunity. I'm talking about the writers, the directors, and, this no censorship, etc. Nobody's scared anymore to put a story out there, which is excellent for an actor. From an actor's point of view, it's excellent because nobody is now worried about experimenting, about making a character, this bad or this good, or, there's no gray area, you can do whatever you want. And that's incredible for any kind of talent, be it, as I said, for the writers, for the, for directors. It's the kind of stuff that you wanted to do all this while, but when we had only television, you didn't have the opportunity to put that across because nobody was going to want to watch it. Saying which also, taking a point from one of the speakers before, I have to admit, my daughter's 14 years old. She doesn't watch TV at all. She watches only digital platform stuff, I have to admit, she does not put on a TV channel. It's all digital. So, when it comes to making more content, I think for that generation, there'll have to be so much more that's made, which means so much more that we can act in, So it's really nice because, as I said earlier also, all of the roles that I was offered, during the pandemic, post the pandemic, and even just before, have been, because they knew it was for the OTT platforms, has been like a breath of fresh air, I would have to say. It was not the Gisa Pita, Suchi, you're playing the bad aunt. Acha, you're the bad mother-in-law. Acha, light eyes pen low and you're the bad so-and-so. It was, a lot of the times it was that. So that typecasting, which everyone said, aren't you worried about being typecast? That's not happening anymore. Nobody can say now to me, for the kind of stuff that, I feel less touched with that I've done on the OTT platforms, there is not one thing that people can say, oh, you've been typecast into doing this. Whereas on television, a lot of that was happening, especially with me in my career, for sure.
All right. Thank you, Suchitra. And, I know I'm very of time as well, so I'm going to quickly move to my next question, and then we can take some audience questions. And this is, of course, open to all the panelists, but I'll get Monika and Megha to respond to this first. It's not surprising that, in our country, when something starts doing well, the critics rise from everywhere, right? Even from the grave, perhaps. In 2019, I know a lot of critics said, the bubble of the OTT is going to burst, it's not going to work. when, little did they know Wuhan had different plans for us, at that point. But, the pandemic clearly proved them wrong. And now that the world is opening up, people are stepping out. The new chatter now amongst the critics is that, is this a sustainable model? What do content creators, streamers, distributors need to do to keep the critics confused? I'm going to ask Monika first, if you can respond to this.
I think just great stories, Gaurav. I don't know why there is so much of, restlessness around. I hear these words very often, competition. When, an industry is so nascent, the opportunities are just exploding. Everyone's beginning to finally do work that you want to, like Suchitra mentioned, the talent is getting to, perform the kind of roles they never got. Writers are getting to write stories that they never wrote before. Directors are trying different things between what they were doing in cinema and what they were doing in linear. And I actually feel that every medium, and TV, film, streaming, all the mediums have their own space. So I don't know why there is this whole bubble conversation that it'll burst. I don't think any such thing is going to happen because, the mobile connections are increasing, smartphones, are increasing, the smart TVs sales are increasing. I don't see where this kind of fear or anxiety is coming from. This is really just the beginning of a very different and dynamic medium, which is actually creating a lot of opportunities for people to work. And it's sort of connecting the entire world in this, storytelling wave, in this creative wave, which is moving across, where content is traveling across borders. People are getting to see much more. And in fact, gaming is, which is rising in such a big way. In the coming years, the way we'll see the storytelling universe and the gaming universe actually coming together. And there's going to be a symbiotic relationship between the two. So I think this is only set to become even more exciting. And the one thing that we all need to do is to actually keep the audiences excited, satisfied, entertained. And that, I think, is the only focus we need to have. Find more unique stories and really tell very high quality, consistent, kind of entertainment that the audience deserves.
If I may jump in there, Gaurav, I would just, I'd just like to say, when you're talking about competition, and this whole bubble, etc. Yes, there's enough and more talent bringing in a lot more content, which is going to happen. Okay, there is enough and more stories, still to be told. But in cinemas don't have to worry about it because, like my mother, at 78, she still wants to go and see her movie in the cinema. Okay, she doesn't want a phone which has which stuff that she can watch on it. Whereas my watchman downstairs, he's constantly on his phone watching only things on OTT platforms because it's so much cheaper for him, which is such a huge big, it's made such a huge big difference in that side as well, as far as the money is concerned and how much more accessible OTT has become for everybody, So as far as the bubble is concerned, I don't think it's going to burst. It's definitely not going to burst. The amount of things that I know that are happening and the amount of work, fingers crossed, that everyone is getting, I don't think it's going to burst. And I think it's definitely here to stay.
I think it's a great point. I'll tell you, Samir, when Scam came out, in fact, my driver actually watched it before I did. And it was a conversation in the car and he said, "Sir, aapne Scam dekha?" And I said, "Nahi, suna hai, but abhi dekha nahi hai." And what I realized is that these people who otherwise don't have time to even go to a theater,
yes.
There's a very large audience who actually doesn't have the time to go to a theater. What you have actually done is, with the OTT platforms now available to them on their phone, these people can entertain themselves on the go, which I think is a beautiful thing that's happened. Otherwise, unless they've got a break in a week on a Sunday where they have to do 10 other things besides, having some time with their family to go and watch a film, you've actually brought the film to them and they can watch it at any point of time. And I think that's a great thing that's happened with the OTT, and it's definitely here to stay for a very, very long time. So,
and I have to say, since everyone's talking about since everyone's talking about Scam, I mean, it's catapulted my husband a bit. He did a small role in Scam, played the Greenlay's CEO, and he's very excited about it. Samir, I got to say that.
Yes, Megha, you had a point.
Just to add to the point here on surviving and whether this bubble will burst. advantage of being in this industry for 3 decades is that every decade the same question gets asked of the previous medium, which gets which is the new medium. So when television happened, everyone pronounced print to die. Then radio happened and they said television and print will die. Then digital happened, they said print, radio, and digital will die. Nobody dies, right? Everyone survives. There's a space for everyone. We can all happily coexist. Like I said, India is one of the few countries where both television and digital are growing and will grow. And to add to that, the one thing we've got to understand that we're a billion people, and there are multiple Indias within India. There is no one size that will fit all. So you have to be able to provide content or satiate their needs, their content consumption needs across multiple kind of requirements they have for the, we're one country where you live in multiple centuries at the same time. People want to watch child marriage and gay marriages, right? So that's the spectrum of audiences you need to please. So we have a huge audience out there, and everybody wants content. Now, the opportunity is that this content, they may be consuming through different platforms. So I think as content makers, it becomes our social and moral responsibility to be able to provide them that content in whichever platform they want to consume. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is for that consumer, because she is the queen. If content is the king, she's the queen. And that's what we need to be providing that for. So I don't think so, to everyone's point, it's not an either or. All of us are going to be able to have a place in this beautiful world and have a coexistence of sorts, and everyone will grow and glow.
May I say something?
Yes, of course, please.
Just to be a little contrarian on this conversation. So yes, of course, this is a huge market and great opportunity and all of that. But, real business and real life tends to be a little more, there's a little degree of practicality that comes into it because, it is a competitive market. There's no questioning about that. We are all fighting for share of attention, share of time, and then share of wallet. Within any kind of category, there will be choices made by consumers. Sure, we agree that, we had 2 shows releasing together on Friday, day before yesterday, one on Hotstar and one on Sony Live, right? And of course, as I told everyone, watch this one first and watch this one second. Your weekend is sorted, be happy, right? But this kind of thing happens. Also, the other thing that happens is that because there's so much competition, there's so many platforms, so much content, that discoverability, actually watching it, you may have heard of something, but you sort of miss it. You don't have the time, you move on, the moment passes, right? You don't come back to it. But these are all real things that happen. And all businesses at the end of the day have a cost of content because it's very expensive to make all this stuff. And you've got to have some kind of a revenue stream in this, right? It's one thing to be saying that I'm making a lot of content for all kinds of audiences, but it must add up. The numbers eventually got to add up. I think that's what bosses and companies and boards, end up asking eventually. So while this is a long game and this is going to sort of play out in that manner because there is so much opportunity, I think, the short term of how individual businesses manage their short terms, right? How do you manage, your quarter by quarter? How do you manage your year? How do you manage a couple of years? Because obviously in the long term, we'll either all be dead or we'll all be successful. But, usually the way life plays out is that, different things happen on the journey. And I think that's what, you got to look out for, because it is complicated, because there is a degree of experimentation, there's a degree of formula. You know what they say about consumers, right? That, of course, everyone wants something new, but then everyone wants something which is familiar and comfortable, right? The reason why TV continues is because a very large section of the audience is still happy with their daily soap opera, right? A very large section of this audience continues to watch the daily soap opera on the streaming service, right? They watch that on Z or on Hotstar. They watch the big Star Plus show on Hotstar. It's not always about the new thing. Even if you talk about new things, there's a limit to how much new can be made. It's easier to make a daily soap. You just make it, it plays out 365 days a year. You try and make new drama series, premium drama series every week in billions, you're probably going to be dead. So I think it's complicated and I think it is competitive. I don't think, there is obviously space for everyone. but eventually goals, personal goals and, company goals and quarterly goals will sort of come in the way of all this utopia. I think.
Thank you, Samir.
No, you're absolutely right, Sam. And I think at the end of the day, while we can say what we can say, these are nice statements to make on content being the key factor. It has to make business sense. And somewhere down the line, I guess there will be some reality checks businesses will have to take, some consolidation, some mergers, some exits. That's part of the entire ecosystem. But yes, you have to be able to make the money to be able to provide that content, which is why in India at least, the broadcasters who went into OTT right now, the survival is based. The revenue is actually coming from the broadcasting business, which is able to fund the OTT business. So that's a harsh reality. Especially organizations like us who were television networks and moving into OTT versus say Netflix and Prime who are original OTT offerings. So the business models are very different. So yes, completely agree on that, Sam. You have to make money at the end of the day. So that's important.
So we want to react to this, what Megha also said, that your core business is actually feeding the OTT business that you have. And, so how is the television programming business going to evolve? And do you feel the pressure with OTTs rising in the market?
It's as of now. Sorry, please go ahead.
Sorry,
Ashok,
Megha,
please go.
I'll come back to you, Megha, in a minute. Yes, Ashok, go on.
Sorry, I was saying that indeed, I think what's going to happen is that people are going to be basically looking at models which are going to evolve going forward from a business perspective. Having said that, from a linear television perspective, what I'm finding is that a lot of content consumption on linear is happening, like Samir said, on the digital platforms, but with one difference. The content consumption is happening not in terms of appointment viewing, but in terms of catch-up content, which is basically that you are viewing your daily soap, but at your own convenience. And I think that's what we are finding in a lot of the markets outside India, where people are saying, I want to catch up on my soap, but I will do it at my own convenience. And therefore, catch-up is beginning to become big. The other thing that's going to happen, I think, is that content creators and broadcasters are going to look at increasingly new models where they're going to basically ask questions in terms of what kind of content is consumed, how is it consumed, where are the consumers consuming it, and what kind of devices are they doing it. And therefore, there is going to be this classic segmenting that's going to happen, and that's really going to be the way it's going to evolve. Having said that, to Monika's point earlier, I think the runway in terms of there are so many more stories to be told. There is a lot more democratization of content consumption happening across the world. And I think with new technologies, I think we've not spoken about things like non-fungible tokens, about ownership of content. There's far more exciting stuff happening out there. And therefore, the runway, I think, is significantly large in terms of not just storytelling, but in terms of the industry itself.
Yeah, and I just want to add here, to what Ashok and Samir both have said. If you just look at the change that has happened in the last 5 years, it's been a very dramatic sort of cataclysmic change from a time when we had, just the linear medium where you had appointment viewing and people were enjoying, people were loving their stories. They still do, like we are saying rightly, but the choice and flexibility that has happened over the last 5 years has actually, it's very rapidly changing habits. We are so used to ordering our meals on phone, everything home delivered to us. So in a similar fashion, entertainment also now, to have it at your fingertips and to, if right now I want to watch something, I have a mood to watch something which is probably happy and, and I don't get to watch it, on a certain medium, which is not serving me that, I have the option. So I think from a change perspective, from a streaming industry perspective, I think, like Ashok rightly said, there's a very long runway. And at the same time, when we look at competition and market forces, etc., that's also a reality. But, that's a constantly evolving reality. Our audience, we have a very large audience in this country, and we are in different stages of evolution. So I think every audience for whom a certain kind of medium works better, we'll be watching that. But fundamentally, having your entertainment in the palm of your hand at your time, your convenience, your flexibility. And, telcos have given those partnerships where you're probably not even doing direct signups to services. You're coming through your phone plans, etc. So all of these are actually ensuring that you are able to experience entertainment in a digital format. And I think that per se will grow. Whether you talk about competition or anything, that per se will be something which will be ever expanding in the country.
Megha, you wanted to make a point?
No, I think the point's been made. We can move to the next question.
Okay, so we are about 20 minutes away from closure. So I'm going to quickly, have your final remarks. And I think the broad question is, what can we expect from the future? Is there going to be a number of changes that we can see in terms of content, being made available to audiences? What are the new trends that we can expect in the next couple of years? If each one of you can just share your thoughts on that, please.
Monika.
So I'll go first.
Okay. Okay, Ashok, you can start.
No, you go. You.
Okay. So, I think this cliche called the new normal, in my opinion, doesn't really exist. I don't think that, there's going to be a new normal, or that there is going to be going back to what it was pre-pandemic. I think that's ruled out. I think content consumption, like in any other industry, consumers are greedy in the sense that they want the best of all the worlds that are possible. And therefore, what's really going to emerge in the future is, how can I have the best in terms of content consumption in the best possible manner, on the best possible device, using the best possible technology. And therefore, we're going to graduate to something where an ecosystem where the movie theaters are going to come back, but they're not going to come back in terms of the way it was. It's going to be basically an experience which is going to be more delectable. It's going to be an experience which is going to be more special. It's going to be, content consumption is going to become more curated there. I think the experience itself will probably override just the experience of going and watching it on the large screen. With regard to content choices, I think there's going to be far more fragmentation in terms of the consumer mind space. I think people are going to demand more specific subdivision of genres, and that's going to be a good thing, because there's going to be a lot more opportunities for the industries, actors, writers, people on the technical side. It's going to evolve. I must, the point that I made about tokens, I'm personally very interested, and I'm very excited about the possibility of actually democratizing ownership of content. I'm sure we've read about a show that was created recently where even before the first episode has been broadcast, it's made its money, and that's going to change the nature of the industry, and we're going to see more of that. I think the other thing is that what the pandemic has taught the industry, content creators, is basically that the financial planning cycles have increased. There's far more flexibility being built into the production stage as well as at the script stage. Given that the vagaries and the uncertainties of the pandemic has taught us to kind of build all these scenarios into it. And therefore, I think, we're going to mature as an industry. Content consumption is going to become more delectable, going to become more specific in terms of what people are going to seek. And I think it's really a bright future for all stakeholders. That's really what I think is going to emerge.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you. Yes, Amir.
No, I was actually asking Monika to go.
Okay, sure.
Please go ahead, Samir.
No, I mean, this is final, right? So, I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, exactly what Ashok said. There's going to be, a lot more content getting created. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of new things will happen. We'll all have to raise our standards to a global standard. There will be a lot more of the existing content that happens. There'll be a lot of new stuff that happens across, not just series, documentaries, movies, animation, young adult, children, gaming. I mean, it's all going to, because finally at the end of the day, it's the same consumer, and it's the X amount of time that the consumer has and the X amount of money that the consumer has to spend on these things. So, I mean, we're going to be, fighting for those things. I suppose one thing that will come out of all this is that in the process of this content creation, because there is so much content, we all love to say that, right? We have a billion people and a billion stories. So, in a billion stories, it's really difficult to stand out. There's so much clutter and there's so much noise that, I mean, everyone can tell a story and everyone can create a story, and all these stories will be out there and they're all at the tip of your, they're in the palm of your hand, and you can watch anything you want, anytime, anywhere, which actually has also got all the makings of, like a complete nightmare. So what invariably happens in all of these is that some things break out, some things stand out, and some things really sort of go out there and resonate with a large number of people. And a lot of the rest, like if you take YouTube has got like 1 trillion pieces of content, right? But we've not seen like more than like, 10 million or 20 million, just in general, because it's too much. So there is something called too much. And that is going to happen to this business as well, because, it allows for everyone to create so many things and all of that. So I suppose the focus for us, and that's what we keep trying to remind ourselves, is that we have to be able to tell stories that are able to stand out, that are able to cut through that clutter, that are able to attract attention, that are able to deliver on those sort of metrics, if you will. Because it's not just a story, it's the storytelling. And then with the storytelling, it's important as to what that storytelling delivers, in whatever metric is being followed. So whether it's advertising revenue or whether it's number of subscribers or whatever it is. I mean, if that's not happening, then it's storytelling for the sake of storytelling, which may not be. So I think these kind of things are going to be more and more important, for the only reason that because there is so much opportunity. And there are so many new creators and so many new people who are all in this business. So it's going to get tougher, but fun.
Thank you, Samir. Monika, yes, if you can make your point, please.
Yeah, I think Ashok and Samir have covered a lot of the things, but very quickly, I think 2 things which will perhaps be interesting to watch out for. We are, the first one I mentioned earlier, which is suddenly stories traveling across the globe. And even within a country like ours, which, as we keep saying, India is a continent and not a country, the kind of cross-pollination that is happening of stories, the new voices, creative voices coming, is actually going to stir the pot a lot. So we have only just seen the beginning of it. What it leads to is something which is a very exciting thing. But I agree with Samir, it is going to get tougher and tougher to get heard, to get noticed, to shine, to be spotlit. So I think because there are so many stories happening and there is only that much attention, the high impact ones will stand apart. There will, of course, be a lot of, this mid-level of amazing stories, which will have a certain size of audience watching them. So I think that will be, so it's exciting. It's very exciting, but it's also complex and challenging for creators and all storytelling platforms per se, because everyone's going to be jostling for space, but it is all the same exciting. And the second thing, I think, which is very, very sort of exciting and really, which is, going to be very defining in the years to come, is the technology which is going to impact storytelling. I think what Unreal Engine is doing, what, gaming is doing, a lot of that is going to actually sort of merge with traditional storytelling. We already see the kind of movies that really have the largest impact in theaters are the ones which are like these spectacular VFX films, and even in series, etc., the way fantasy genre is doing. So I think there is a lot of impact of technology, which is very exciting. We are in the very sort of early stages of that. It is dramatically shifting as we speak. So, and I think we don't know what real impact it will have and how things will merge. A lot of creators are experimenting with all these new technologies, cameras and, LED panels and creating new worlds, etc. So I think along with the really good, authentic, heartwarming stories, there will also be these absolute extravaganzas, and we'll have to see how it all evolves, but it's very exciting.
Thank you, Monika. Yes, Suchitra, your final remarks.
Yeah,
please.
most definitely exciting. Speaking from the other side of the camera, now I know what all goes into it. Behind the scenes. But, for us, it's just onwards and forwards, and it's the most exciting time. I've been in the industry for 27 years, and I have to say that this is the most exciting time of my career. It really is. And, Sabir, you were saying, loads of things are going to be made. Yes, absolutely. Make them because we're here to act in them. And I didn't say thank you very much for having me on this chat, and to all of the students of LSE. I hope this has helped you.
Definitely has.
I think I'll just sort of end up by saying that the 2-3 things from my side as well, is that I personally feel that, OTT is going to be an SVOD business. So it's going to be fight for the subscribers, which is what all of us are working towards. And the television business will continue to be an advertising and distribution-led revenue business. But I think one of the key, besides all what has been spoken, is also the pricing, which will play a key role in a consumer decision-making. Because when everything is fantastic, then what do you got to choose? Because I still have only those 24 hours in a day, and only that much content I can consume. So I will have to make choices. And those choices will be dependent on not just the brilliant content, assuming that everyone provides you that. What is the other key factor which will make that decision for a consumer to make that choice will be the price. And I think pricing, and hence the backend, the data, the technology, all of that, which helps you provide that content at the best possible price, will be a key differentiating factor as well to make the business work. And that's when businesses will have to decide what space they want to be, whether they want to be in the premium space or the mass space, and how do you make your economics work. To Sam's earlier point, will be, in my view, a very, very critical business decisions organizations will have to make in the next few years.
Megha. Thank you, Megha. And on that very exciting note, I just want to say that entertainment is, of course, a very intrinsic part of our culture, which is becoming increasingly global and digital driven, if I can say that. And the content industry is obviously changing with the culture too. So, this is an exciting time for the entertainment industry, and the winners may look very different from what we've seen before. So thank you, panelists, for giving us your valuable time. I'm going to quickly call upon Pranav, who's the student moderator, to throw some questions at the panel before we can close in about 10 minutes. Pranav, can you come back, please?
Pranav, you're on mute.
Yes.
All right, better. Okay. Thank you, Gaurav, for leading like an amazing moderator session. There were some very good questions. Interesting stuff that I've learned throughout attending this. We have a couple of audience questions, but since we are running short of time, I'm going to pick 2 to 3 of them. And whoever wants, it could be open to all as well. And whoever's ready to answer can go ahead. So the first one is, so podcasts are picking up a lot worldwide. So will streaming platforms perhaps add this form of content into their overall strategy to give access to celebrities and other content makers? So that's the first one.
So the question is, I think they're talking about the growth of podcasts, and will platforms like Netflix, Discovery allow podcasts to be made as a part of their overall offering? Given
well, I hope they do, because I've got a podcast out, and it's it's another medium which I think many people are interested in now. I was introduced to it much later, but now that I have my own show, I know what goes on, and how many people listen to it, and also they want to see stuff. So not only do they want to just hear the audio side of it, they want to see stuff. So if a podcast has, like my show, has video as well as audio, to get that onto an OTT platform is just incredible. I think, then, we can stop at nothing.
Monika, do you have a point? You want to make a point on that?
I think all the platforms that are doing podcasts, I think it's important that they thrive and they continue to do the podcasts. So, never say never, but I think it's really important that different sort of formats of content survive across different mediums, and everything. While it's good to aggregate things, I think it's always also good for things to survive in their own original format.
Okay. Yes, anyone else has a point on this?
It's I'm happy just being an actor on the Netflix shows. It's okay.
Okay, Pranav, we can take the next
one. All right. So moving on to the second question. So is it fair to say that mid-budget films are easier to create and there's like a faster turnaround from a business point of view? So the main question would be, does it mean big budget films would then be limited?
Nair, would you like to?
I am happy to try and.
Yes, of course.
You know what, in this, when you're making any piece of content and if you talk about movies, it appears easier to make the mid-budget or the small budget film because it's easier to put together, easier to raise finance, it costs a lot less. And therefore, you sort of think that, at this kind of a reasonable budget, it should all end up well. But like with any piece of content, what we've seen is that there eventually ends up with, it requiring an audience. So it requires a buyer, then it requires an audience, and then it requires to, that part of that virtuous cycle to be completed before the first part can be. And oftentimes what we see is that the movies that are in the middle somewhere, that is the mid-budget, are in the most dangerous no man's land, right? Because then the big budget movie is coming, packaged and it's arriving, to blitz out. And the smaller movie is, really the breakout, the sleeper hit, it's a different one. You're doing something, very different and chancy and, debutantes, all of those things. Both of those outcomes are easier to sort of, anticipate and, sort of work with. It's the middle ground. Anything in life, in general, I know they love to say stay in the middle ground, but the middle ground is usually the most dangerous. So, big budget movies will continue to happen because I think there is a market for it. Theaters will reopen. All of that will happen. I find it hard to believe that human beings are just going to sit in their houses and order in everything, order in their entertainment, order in their food, order in their clothes. I think human beings by default will go out there. And, theaters will get back. All of it will work. But in general, I think, playing it safe kind of budgeting is usually the most risky.
Okay. Anyone else would like to comment on this question? Yeah. Okay, Pranav, we can move to perhaps the last one.
Right. I remember Monika pointing out saying that we're not in a bubble in terms of OTT content, and we have a lot of talent that's getting in there, a lot of writers, a lot of people who actually want to take part into this platform. So we have like a lot of content that's happening across India, and digitization is making it very crazy. So it's expanding across all regions. And I also remember you saying that it's moving on. There was like a South wave where people from all other parts of the country were watching genres of movies which they haven't seen it for the very first time. Now, are there any plans of using Indian content and expanding into other areas outside as well? And how exactly would that resemble, and how would that content be governed? Yeah.
Sorry, Pranav, what do you mean using Indian content in other areas?
Well, there are a lot of audiences in other countries as well who consume that. And so are there any plans or any strategies where we could take advantage of that and move it to other markets as well? And if so?
Actually, Pranav, that's already happening, if I were to say, when, we are in a very borderless sort of, content consumption environment where streaming ensures that the same content, the same story, which is probably dropping. I'll give you an example. Minnal Murli, for example, the superhero, the Malayalam superhero film that we did.
It's a good movie, yeah.
It was trending across 30 countries. We had Tom Holland, who plays Spider-Man, actually put it on his watch list. You had the Tottenham Hotspur's captain saying he is keen to watch Minnal Murli. So, people are already noticing content that they want to watch, that they're excited by. Navrasa which was our Mani Ratnam's anthology with so many wonderful directors and writers, that was trending across countries. We've had our series, The Fame Game, Aranyak, they've all been on the global non-English top 10 lists. When we, on any given day, the number of series that we drop on Netflix, it's a phenomenal number. And to actually have Indian series, Indian films trend on the global non-English top 10 list is actually a feat. You know, it's so content is already traveling, and we don't need to make an extra effort or do anything different. I think we just need to really tell world-class stories, and we need to be very authentic to our own sort of context. And when a story works in its home country is when actually it really gets into this virtuous cycle of being recommended to people across the world. Genres get recommended, popular stories get recommended, and more people start seeing them. And like I mentioned earlier, the Indian content in dubs is also working across many countries. So I think that's the exciting part, which is already happening.
And if I can add there, you know, it's exciting to be in projects, with Netflix and of course a few of the other OTT platforms, wherein the spoken language, like how all of us are talking in English, you know, but in keeping with Indian values, Indian ideas, Indian stories, but we're shooting in English. All that also makes it a hell of a lot more interesting for people across the world. And that's I think that's amazing that is happening as well. I'm really excited about my new show that's coming up, and you know, it's eyebrows raised. So it's an English show, you know, but saying which people abroad are just like, oh, wow, it's an English show, you know, so it becomes easier for a lot of people, and I think that's a great thing as well from the OTT platforms.
I'm super excited about your new show coming up as well, Suchitra.
You would be, Samir. It's your son's show.
Yeah, so let me take the opportunity to now just cue the show so everybody watches. It's called Eternally Confused and Eager for Love. It's a wonderful, sort of cheeky dating show. It's got a wonderful comic tone to it, and it's been written and directed by a debut creator who's debuting on Netflix, Ravi Nair. Samir, please wish all the best to the show for all the right reasons.
Yes.
Of course. All the best. All the very best. Rahul Nair.
Rahul
Yeah.
Nair, yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful show.
All the best. Looking forward to it. March 18th.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, panelists. Just before we close, we're just 1 minute over time. But I want to just make a very quick announcement for, I think, the LSE students here. You know, there was somebody who was going to join us, very special from the world of entertainment, who couldn't make it this evening. But she's kind enough to consider an online interaction with you students sometime in April. I'm not going to tell who she is. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but all I can say is, "Ek chutki sindoor ki qeemat tum kya jano, Ramesh." So, thank you very much. If you're smart, you'll know who I'm talking about. Have a good evening, and thank you, panelists, for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Everyone. Bye.